continue doing some retouching on this image here. I'm going to take out this sign. I'm going to attempt to take out this sign right here. I'm going to zoom in so I can see it out a little bit more right there. And so I know that I at least have to change the color here, and then I want to clone over it with some texture, and I need to cover the wall where the sign is, and I need to cover the ground where the sign is and where the shadow is, because it's changed colors down here. So the most basic way to do this would be to just start painting on a new layer. So I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to grab a brush, just a solid brush for now, and just select colors from here and randomly just fill this in a little bit. I could just clone right over this, but sometimes the cloning doesn't work exactly the way you want it to, so I'm just exploring other ways to do that same thing, basically. So when I zoom out, it's kind of disappeared a little bit. So that's the general idea. The next thing I'm going to do is, well, I'm going to fill in a little bit more. Oops. Cover these last remaining parts. I'm going to paint this sort of in the way that the bricks are looking. So they have like a specific direction that they're going in. There's little lines. I'm just going to paint in some of that for now. And just to give the illusion of some brickwork, just picking random darker colors to do this part here. I'm going to paint in this little line right here. Since this side doesn't have bricks, I'm going to just follow the pattern that I'm seeing around it. I'm going to get a softer brush now, just to blend things in a little bit better. Let's choose a brush like that. I could even lower the opacity on the brush so that the colors blend as I'm painting. And again, the reason why I'm painting it instead of using a clone tool is that it's just good practice to be able to do this, or it's a good skill to have, basically. Sometimes you don't have the space you need to clone from, even though I do have a lot of space here. I'm just showing you that it is possible to do this without cloning. But in this case, we can clone, so I'm going to do a combination of everything. I'm going to use some selections, copying and pasting, and cloning, and painting. But since I can, I'm going to get this close just with paint first. And again, it's not only the fact that you might not have the cloning source available, but sometimes you want to change the way that it looks. So maybe you want to just change the shape of this wall, and you would want to be able to paint some of it in to do that first. So that's not bad. I can zoom out just to check this out. It already looks really close, but I know that if we zoom in, it doesn't have the texture. Some of the colors are off. So at this point, I could go on a new layer and clone over this. So I could go into the clone tool, and I'm going to use the same brush. Choose the source, and just clone over. I'm using a brush that has an opacity control, so I don't have to clone over it completely. It's using a transparency basically to do that, and just choosing different areas to clone from. I'm going to zoom in, select this little line right here, and clone more of that, just because it had a good edge to it. So zoom out, and it's looking a little bit better. Another thing I could do, I'll do another method of retouching, is I'm going to go back down to that photo layer and just make a selection of this area right here. Actually, I'll use this tool because I can actually select it in perspective. Just grab even some of that bottom area where the wall meets the sidewalk, and press Command J. Grab my move tool. I'm going to put this layer above everything else, and then just bring this over here like this. And I don't want to leave it exactly the way it is because it's obviously a repeat of what's over here. I'm going to line up this bottom line with the line that we see down here. Uncheck snap. So these things move more fluidly. And I'm just going to change the perspective a little bit, because it has moved in perspective. I'm going to try that out. And I'm going to lower the opacity so I can see through it to see if it's lining up with that line, that crack, and it does. And now I'm just going to blend this down. So I'm going to use a layer blending mode, overlay. Now the texture from this photo has blended down on top of my paint and everything else. So I can erase the stuff I don't need because I already have texture over here. Lower the opacity, maybe even choose a soft brush so that my edges aren't so sharp. And I'm going to lower the opacity a little bit so it's not so bright and intense. And what that does is it also lets us see through to some of the patterning in here, so it doesn't look like it's repeated so much. I'm just erasing the edge a little bit more. So now I get a nice photo texture over this part here. And I can bring this up a little bit more if I have to. And you could try different blending modes. If you don't like the blending mode thing, you can just leave it set to normal, lower the opacity a little bit, and go back and again and erase that edge. So now that wall's starting to look pretty good. And then where you do see things repeating, you can just clone over those. So for this part here, these two little dots repeat right there. I'm just going to clone over that. so we don't see those parts. So it's not so obvious. Zoom out, and it looks okay. And so I would just repeat those same steps for this stuff. Or I could just, so I could clone, I could paint. I think in this part here, I'm going to use a photo also. I could select the photo part from up here, make a selection from up here, for example. Use Command J, I'll bring that up to the top also, just to make sure we can see it over everything else. And I'll bring this down like so. And already it looks great because it's the same area of the photo. I'm just going to change the perspective a little bit so it matches a little bit better. Lining up this blue line here, and I'm sort of lining up these horizontals so that they match what we see behind it. Press OK, and again I'm just going to erase this edge. And you could use a layer mask also so that you don't erase too much. Probably would have been a good thing to do, but I'm just going to keep erasing just because I can. Now when I zoom out, sort of covers that area, and I can do some levels adjustments to sort of darken it a little bit. It seemed like it was a little bit bright because this part up here is a little bit lighter, and that's pretty much done for this part. I can clean these edges, and there's a little bit more work to do in this top area right here, and up here, but that's the basic idea. Using photo textures from other parts in the image, bringing them in. You could even use photos from other images and do the same thing.